What you're about to hear is the story of a guy whose wife kept getting hit on at the gym by the same dude, over and over. She said no. She said it clearly. She said it more times than anyone should have to. And this guy, we're calling him the regular, just kept showing up, kept pushing, kept touching. So her husband did what any calm, calculated man would do. He watched, he documented, he filed. And when the regular thought the rules didn't apply to him, he found out they absolutely did. This one builds slow, but the payoff is worth every second. My wife's gym. Harasser laughed when I told him to stop. He stopped laughing when he got banned, then a restraining order. My name's Nate, and I work as an operations analyst at a regional bank. Not glamorous, not exciting, but it pays the mortgage and I'm good at it. I spend most of my day looking at spreadsheets and flagging stuff that doesn't add up. Patterns. That's what I do. I find patterns. And I'm telling you this because it matters later. My wife Jess and I have been together for 9 years, married for 6. She's an early riser. Always has been. Her alarm goes off at 5:15, and she's at the gym by 5:45 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. She's been going to the same place, this mid-sized gym about 12 minutes from our house, for almost 3 years. She knows the staff. She knows the regulars. She's got her routine down to a science, and she likes it that way. I go to the same gym, just later. I usually hit it around 6:30 in the evening after work. We don't overlap. We never have. Jess does her thing in the morning, I do mine at night, and it works. So about 4 months ago, Jess comes home from her Tuesday morning session and mentions, almost like an afterthought, that some guy at the gym tried to chat her up. She said he was being friendly at first, asked if she needed a spot, made small talk about the playlist. She told him she was married, showed him the ring. She always wears it, even at the gym. I honestly wish she'd leave it in the car, but that's a whole other thing, and figured that was that. It wasn't. By the following Thursday, he was back. Same approach, asked her what she was training. She gave him a one-word answer and put her earbuds back in. He hung around for another minute, then drifted off. Jess told me about it, but didn't seem too bothered. She said he was probably just lonely and bad at reading signals. I said, okay, but keep me posted. I didn't think much of it at that point. Honestly, gyms are full of guys who try to strike up conversations, and most of them take the hint after a clear rejection. I figured this was one of those situations. Awkward, a little annoying, but over. The next week, same thing. He found her during her warm-up on the bikes, started talking again. This time she was more direct. Told him she wasn't interested in conversation, that she was here to work out, and that she'd already told him she was married. He held up his hands like, whoa, I'm just being friendly, and walked away. Classic move. You know the type. Act like the other person is overreacting so they feel guilty for having a boundary. I asked Jess if she could describe him, just so I had a picture in my head. She said mid-30s, average height, brownish hair, always wearing the same rotation of tank tops like he bought a six-pack of them at Costco. No tattoos she could see. Nothing distinctive. Just a guy. The kind of guy you wouldn't notice in a grocery store. Now here's where I should explain something about Jess. She's not someone who needs rescuing. She's handled creeps before. She's handled pushy people at work. She's handled her own family drama without flinching. She's tough. And she wanted to handle this herself, which I respected. Completely. I wasn't about to storm in there and make a scene on her behalf when she didn't ask me to. But the pattern was forming. Week 4. He waited for her near the water fountain. Not working out. Not filling a bottle. Just standing there like he was waiting for a bus that only comes when Jess walks by. She walked past him and he said something like, "You look amazing today." She didn't respond. Kept walking. He followed her, not closely, but he moved to a machine near wherever she went. Twice during that session. She'd switch to a different area and within a few minutes he'd wander over to something nearby. Not directly next to her, but close enough that it was obvious. Jess told me this one a little differently. She wasn't dismissive anymore. She was annoyed. Really annoyed. She said she'd actually cut her workout short by about 15 minutes because she couldn't focus. She said she felt like she was being watched and that it was throwing off her whole routine. That word, watched, it sat with me for the rest of the night. I was still thinking about it when I went to bed. I'm a light sleeper anyway, always have been. and I kept running through scenarios in my head. What if he does it again? What if he gets more aggressive? What if she's downplaying how uncomfortable she actually is because she doesn't want me to worry? I asked if she wanted me to come with her next time. She said no. She said she'd talk to the front desk if it happened again. I said okay, and I meant it. I wasn't going to push. Week 5, he didn't show. Jess thought maybe he'd moved on or switched gyms. I honestly hoped so. We didn't talk about it much that week. We had a dinner at her sister's house on Saturday. Her sister makes this insane baked ziti, by the way. Like, aggressively good. The kind where you go back for thirds and feel no shame. And the whole gym thing kind of faded into the background. Then week 6 hit. Jess came home on a Tuesday, and I could tell something was off. She was quieter than usual. She didn't stretch in the living room like she normally does. She just went straight to the shower. I gave her some space, then asked over breakfast. She told me he was back, and this time he'd touched her. Put his hand on her lower back while she was doing cable rows and said something about her form being off. She stepped away. He laughed it off like it was nothing. She said, "Don't touch me," loud enough that a couple people looked over. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Relax, I was trying to help." I'm not going to pretend I was calm when she told me that. I was furious. My jaw was tight. My hands were flat on the table. And for about 10 seconds, I didn't say anything because I didn't trust what was going to come out of my mouth. But I didn't blow up. I sat there and I listened. Jess said she went to the front desk after it happened, but the manager wasn't in yet. It was barely 6 a.m. So she talked to the kid working the counter, who said he'd pass it along. Real reassuring. I told Jess I wanted to adjust my schedule. I said I'd start going in the mornings with her. Not to hover, not to play bodyguard. I said I wanted to be there in case this guy escalated, and that I'd keep my distance unless something happened. She thought about it for a minute, then agreed. So that Thursday, I went with her, 5:45 a.m., which, by the way, is inhumane. I don't know how Jess does it 4 days a week. My alarm went off at 5:10, and I genuinely considered whether the whole thing was worth it. It was. But I need that on the record. I set up on the opposite side of the floor, near the free weights. Jess went to her normal area by the machines and cable station. I could see her from where I was. She could see me. But to anyone watching, we didn't look like we were together. We didn't drive together either. I took my own car and went in about 5 minutes after her. I even wore a hat I don't normally wear, which in hindsight was probably unnecessary, but I wasn't thinking about fashion at 5 in the morning. The regular, that's what Jess had started calling him. And honestly, it fit because this dude showed up like clockwork. Wasn't there that Thursday. I did my full workout, Jess did hers, and we drove home separately. Fine. Saturday. Same plan. I got to the gym at 5:50 and posted up by the dumbbells. Jess was already on a bike, and sure enough, around 6:15 he walked in. Average-looking guy. Probably mid-30s. Wore the same gray tank top both times I ever saw him, or at least it looked like the same one. He had this walk like he owned the place. Not physically big or intimidating. Just had that vibe, you know? The I'm a big deal in my own head vibe. He got on a treadmill for maybe 10 minutes, then migrated toward the machines. Right near Jess. I watched. I didn't move. Jess was doing lateral pull-downs and had her earbuds in. He walked up behind her and said something. I couldn't hear it from where I was, but I saw her take one earbud out and shake her head. He kept talking. She looked straight ahead and didn't respond. He reached over and touched her arm, just above the elbow. Light grip, like he was trying to get her attention. She pulled her arm away. Clear as day. He stayed right there, didn't move back. Didn't take the hint. He was still talking. I set the dumbbells down and walked across the floor. Didn't rush. Didn't make a scene. I walked like I was headed to the water fountain, which happened to be right past where they were standing. But I stopped. I looked at him and said, and I remember this word for word, because I'd been running it in my head for 3 days. She's told you no, multiple times. This is the last time. He looked at me like I'd just spoken French. Then he looked at Jess, then back at me. And he laughed. Not a nervous laugh either. A full, chest-out, are you kidding me laugh. He said something like, "Who are you, her dad?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I turned to Jess and said, "Let's go talk to the front desk." She nodded. We walked to the counter together. The regular went back to his machine. I could feel him watching us the whole way. This time the manager was there. Guy named Phil, mid-40s, been running the place for a couple years. I'd talked to him a few times during my evening sessions. He knew me by name. I told him what had been happening, the repeated approaches, the touching, the ignoring of clear boundaries, the fact that Jess had already reported it once, and nothing came of it. Jess backed everything up. She was calm, specific, detailed. She's always been good under pressure like that. Phil pulled up the membership records and asked us to describe the guy. We did. He said he'd review the camera footage from the floor and talk to the staff member who was working the morning Jess first reported it. He also said he'd file a formal incident report and gave us a copy. I asked if we could also file a written complaint, separate from whatever internal process they had. Phil said yes and gave us a form. We filled it out, both of us. I kept a photo of it on my phone. I also asked, politely, if the gym had a harassment policy posted anywhere. Phil pointed to a sign near the locker rooms. I walked over and read it. Standard stuff. Unwanted physical contact, repeated unwanted approaches after being asked to stop, and intimidation were all listed as grounds for membership revocation. Good enough. Within 3 days, Phil called Jess and told her they'd reviewed the footage and were revoking the guy's membership. Done. No appeal. He was out. Phil said they'd also flagged him in their system, so he couldn't re-register under a different name. I have no idea how that actually works, but I appreciated the thought. Jess went back to her normal schedule. I stayed on the morning sessions for another week just to be safe, then shifted back to evenings. Things felt normal again. Jess was stretching in the living room. She was playing her morning playlist in the kitchen while making eggs. Everything settled for about a week. Hold on. For the listeners, this is me, not Nate. I gotta jump in here because I need someone to explain to me how a grown man gets told no by a woman 6 or 7 separate times, and his brain goes, yeah, but what if I try again? That's not confidence. That's a firmware glitch. This dude is running on Internet Explorer. He's the human version of a pop-up ad you can't close. You keep hitting the X and he just reloads in a new tab. And then, he laughed when the husband showed up. Laughed. My guy, you're about to get your membership revoked and you're doing open mic night. Keep listening. It was a Wednesday evening. I just finished my workout, back and biceps, nothing special, and was walking to my car in the parking lot. It was about 7:45, still a little light outside. And there he was. The regular. Sitting on the hood of a car 2 spots away from mine. Not his car. Someone else's car. Just sitting there, looking at his phone. I stopped walking for a second. He looked up, and there was this moment, maybe 2 seconds, where we just stared at each other. He didn't say anything. He didn't move. He just looked at me with this expression that I can only describe as flat. Not angry, not smiling, not scared. Just flat. I got in my car and drove home. Didn't say a word to him. But the second I pulled into my driveway, I texted Jess and told her what happened. She didn't panic. She's not a panicker. But she asked me the same question I was already asking myself. Why was he there? His membership was revoked. He had no reason to be in that parking lot. And how did he know which car was mine? Or did he? Was it just a coincidence? I don't believe in coincidences. Not when there's a pattern. I drove by the gym the next day on my way home from work. He wasn't there. I drove by on Friday too. Nothing. Saturday morning, Jess went to the gym at her normal time, and I followed 10 minutes behind. Separate cars again. No sign of him. I started to think maybe it was nothing. Maybe he was meeting someone there. Maybe he was picking someone up. Maybe he just likes sitting on random cars like some kind of parking lot gargoyle. People are weird. It doesn't always mean something. Then the next Wednesday, exactly 1 week later, Jess texted me at 6:03 a.m. She'd just pulled into the gym parking lot and his car was there. She recognized it. Same dark blue sedan with a dent on the rear bumper and one of those air freshener trees hanging from the mirror. He was sitting in the driver's seat, parked 3 spots from where she normally parked. She didn't get out. She sat in her car and texted me. I told her to drive to the gas station across the street and wait. I called the gym. Phil wasn't there yet, but I left a message and told him what was happening. Then I got in my car and drove to the gym. By the time I got there, maybe 22 minutes, I hit every red light on Route 9. His car was gone. Jess was still at the gas station. I picked her up. She was fine, just irritated, and we went home. That was it for me. I was done waiting. I sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop and did what I do best. I organized information. I made a timeline. Every incident, every date, every interaction. I included what was said, what was done, who witnessed it, and what the gym's response was at each step. I attached the photo of the written complaint form. I wrote down the dates and approximate times of both parking lot sightings. Pause for a second. This is where most guys would lose their cool. I've seen it 100 times on this channel. Dude gets angry, does something impulsive, and suddenly, he's the one looking bad. Not Nate. This man sat down at his kitchen table and built a case file like he was assembling IKEA furniture, except every piece actually fit and nothing was left over. He literally used his day job skills. Operations analyst energy. You know those guys in heist movies who have the blueprints spread out on the table and everyone's standing around going, wait, that might actually work? That's Nate. Except his heist is a restraining order and his crew is his wife and a printer. That afternoon, I called the non-emergency police line. I explained the situation. I told them about the harassment at the gym, the membership revocation, and the 2 parking lot incidents. The officer on the phone asked if there had been any direct threats. I said no. He asked if there had been any physical violence. I said he touched my wife's arm and back without consent, multiple times, and she told him to stop each time. He said they could send someone out to take a statement, or I could come to the station. I went to the station, brought the timeline, the complaint form photo, and Jess. She gave her own statement. I gave mine. The whole thing took about an hour and a half, which felt long, but the officer we talked to was decent. Asked good questions, listened, took notes, didn't dismiss anything. He read through the timeline I'd made and actually commented that it was one of the most organized complaints he'd seen. I told him I do this kind of thing for a living, just with different data. He almost smiled at that. He said based on what we'd described, there might not be enough yet for an arrest, but that the pattern of behavior, especially the parking lot appearances after being banned, gave us a strong basis for a civil restraining order. He also said if the guy showed up again, to call 911 immediately and reference the report number. He gave us his card and said we could reach out if anything else happened before the court date. We went home. I looked up the process for filing a restraining order in our state. It's not as complicated as I expected. Mostly paperwork, a filing fee, and then waiting for a hearing date. The forms were straightforward if you've ever filled out anything government-related, which working at a bank, I have. Plenty. Jess and I talked about it over dinner. She wasn't sure at first. She said she didn't want to make it a bigger thing than it needed to be. She said maybe the police report would scare him off, and that would be the end of it. And look, I understood where she was coming from. Nobody wants to go to court. Nobody wants to sit across from someone who's been making their life uncomfortable and relive the whole thing in front of a judge. But I told her it was already a big thing. This guy had been asked to stop multiple times. He'd been banned from the gym, and he was still showing up. That's not someone who respects boundaries. That's someone who's testing how far he can push. She agreed, not right away. She went quiet for a few minutes and finished eating. But then she looked at me and said, "Okay, file it." I filed the petition the next day. I printed out everything, the timeline, the complaint form, screenshots of the text between Jess and me on the mornings of the parking lot incidents. I also went back to the gym and asked Phil if he could provide a written statement confirming the harassment complaints and the membership revocation. Phil said he'd check with the gym's ownership group first, but that he'd try to get us something. He came through. 2 days later, he emailed me a formal letter on the gym's letterhead confirming that a member, didn't name him in the letter, but I had his name from the police report, had been banned from the facility due to repeated harassment complaints from a female member and her spouse. It included the date of revocation and a reference to their internal incident report. I attached everything to the petition and submitted it. Anyway, the waiting part was probably the hardest. You file the paperwork and then you just sit there. The court has to schedule a hearing. The other party has to be served. And meanwhile, you're just living your life hoping this dude doesn't show up at your house. Jess went back to her morning sessions, but she started going at 6:15 instead of 5:45. Said she wanted to make sure more people were around. I went with her on Saturdays. We were careful, but not paranoid. At least that's what I told myself. It took about 11 days for the temporary restraining order to come through. The court granted it based on the filing alone. Jess and I didn't even have to appear for that part. It was a temporary order, good for about 3 weeks until the full hearing. The terms were simple. He had to stay at least 200 feet from both of us, our home, and the gym. No contact of any kind. He got served on a Friday. I know because the process server confirmed it, and I got a notification from the court. Yo, timeout. Can we talk about the fact that this guy got banned from a gym, for being a creep, and his move was to start doing stakeouts in the parking lot? That's not, I'm just in the area behavior. That's Netflix documentary behavior. Most people get banned from a gym and they go find another gym. Or they buy a Peloton, or they do push-ups in their living room like the rest of us during 2020. But no. The regular decided to go full surveillance mode in a parking lot, like he's auditioning for a reboot of Creep starring himself. And spoiler, he didn't get the part. What he got was paperwork. Sit tight. The full hearing was about 3 weeks later. Jess and I both appeared. We had a lawyer, Jess's cousin actually, corporate law mainly, but he knew enough family law to walk us through the process, and he did it as a favor. We took him and his wife out to a really nice Italian place afterward to say thanks. I had this ridiculous mushroom risotto that I'm still thinking about, honestly. The regular showed up with no lawyer. That surprised me. I figured he'd at least have someone there to represent him, but no. Just him. In a button-down shirt that was slightly too big for him, like he borrowed it from someone with wider shoulders, sitting at the table across from us. He looked smaller in that courtroom than he ever looked at the gym. I'm not sure if it was the fluorescent lights or the context or what, but the confidence was gone. He just looked like a guy who didn't want to be there. The judge reviewed everything. Our lawyer walked through the timeline, the repeated approaches, the physical contact, the gym ban, the parking lot appearances. He submitted the gym's letter and the police report. Jess testified. She was clear, direct, and steady. She didn't exaggerate, didn't get emotional. She just laid it out. The regular got a chance to respond. He said, and this is close to a direct quote, that he was just being friendly and that people are too sensitive these days. He said he had no idea Jess was uncomfortable, despite her literally telling him, "Don't touch me," in front of other members. He said the parking lot was a public space, and he had every right to be there. The judge asked him why he was in the parking lot of a gym he'd been banned from, on 2 occasions, one of which was at 6 a.m. He didn't have a good answer for that one. The judge granted the full restraining order, 1 year, 200 feet from both of us, our home, our vehicles, and the gym. No contact, no communication through third parties, no showing up at places he knows we frequent. Violation would be a criminal matter. The regular looked at the table the whole time the judge was reading the terms. Didn't make eye contact with me or Jess. Didn't say a word. We walked out of the courthouse and into the hallway. Jess didn't say anything for a minute. We took the elevator down, walked out the front entrance, and stood on the steps for a second. It was one of those perfect late morning moments where the sun hits you and you realize you've been holding your breath for weeks. She squeezed my hand in the parking lot, but didn't say much. We drove home in separate cars. I had to go back to work. I'd taken a half day and my inbox was definitely going to be a disaster. And she texted me a single thumbs up emoji when she got home. That was enough. Wait, let me jump in here for a sec. Can we give it up for Nate? Not because he yelled. Not because he threw a punch. Not because he did some dramatic action movie moment in the gym parking lot. He won this by being boring. Gloriously, strategically, devastatingly boring. He made a spreadsheet. He printed documents. He filed forms. He went to the police station and talked like a normal adult. This man did paperwork so hard that a judge handed him a restraining order. That's the most underrated kind of power move there is. The kind where you win and nobody even raises their voice. The regular came in thinking charm was a cheat code. Turns out it doesn't work when someone knows the actual rules. Final update. It's been about 5 weeks since the restraining order was granted. No sightings, no contact, no parking lot cameos. The gym's been quiet. Jess is back to her 5:45 schedule, and she says she actually looks forward to it again, which is something she hadn't said in a while. I shifted back to my evening sessions about 2 weeks after the hearing. Felt weird being back on my old schedule, honestly, like readjusting to a time zone after a long trip. The first night I walked in around 6:30, the gym was half empty the way it always is on a Tuesday evening, and it felt like a different planet compared to the 5:45 crowd. Phil gave me a nod the first night I came in, didn't say anything about it, just a nod. I nodded back and went to the squat rack. That was that. A couple of the morning regulars, the real ones, not him, apparently asked Jess if everything was okay after they noticed the guy disappeared. She just said he was no longer a member and left it at that. One of the women on the morning crew, a lady named Carol who's been going to that gym since it opened, told Jess she'd noticed the guy following her around weeks ago and almost said something herself. I kind of wish she had. But I also get it. Nobody wants to get involved. Things at home are good. Normal. Jess still makes fun of me for going to the police station in basketball shorts because I'd come straight from the gym and didn't think to change. She's got a point. I looked ridiculous sitting in that plastic chair with my gym bag between my feet giving a statement about harassment. Not my finest visual moment. I've thought about whether we did the right thing. Not filing the restraining order, I'm certain about that. But the timing. Should I have stepped in earlier? Should I have gone to the gym with Jess after the first or second incident instead of waiting until she asked? I go back and forth. Jess says no, that she needed to handle it herself first, and that my stepping in when I did was the right call. I trust her judgment. But there's a part of me that wonders if those weeks of letting it play out were weeks she shouldn't have had to deal with. I still drive by the gym on my way home sometimes, even on days I don't work out. Just glance at the parking lot. Haven't seen the blue sedan? I probably won't stop doing that for a while. Maybe that's paranoid. Maybe that's just what happens when someone messes with the person you care about most. I don't know. One more thing. I checked with our lawyer cousin about what happens when the restraining order expires in about 11 months. He said we can petition to extend it if there's been any violation or if we have reason to believe the behavior would resume. I've already started a folder on my computer, just in case. Old habits. And honestly, the thing that bugs me most isn't even the harassment itself. It's the laugh. When I told him to stop and he laughed. Like it was funny. Like Jess was a joke. Like me standing there telling him to back off was entertainment. That laugh lives in my head rent-free. And I think it always will. But at least now there's a court order that says he has to keep it 200 feet away from us. So yeah, that's where we are. Quiet, stable, and documented. The way I like it. For anyone going through something similar, document everything. Dates, times, what was said, who saw it. Don't wait for it to get bad enough. If someone is repeatedly ignoring your boundaries after you've been clear, that is bad enough. You don't need a dramatic moment to justify protecting yourself. A spreadsheet works just fine. Speaking of which, have you ever had someone refuse to take a clear no for an answer? What did you do? Drop it in the comments. I'm curious how other people have handled this. Listen, this one wasn't loud. There was no courtroom explosion, no dramatic confrontation. Just a guy who sat down, organized the facts, and let the system do its job. And honestly, that's the most satisfying kind of story on this channel. Because the regular walked in thinking he could charm his way past a woman's boundaries and laugh off her husband. He walked out with a revoked membership and a year-long restraining order. That's what happens when you mistake patience for weakness. If this one hit home, drop a comment. Subscribe if you haven't. And I'll catch you in the next one.